Yo, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel, JenksTCG. My name is Jenks, and today we're going to be taking a look at a really cool fighting deck box, lightning box. I don't know, but this is going to be episode 2 of my series, Inside the Mind. We're going to take a look at some of the more higher level information on a archetype that really is starting to get a lot of talk now that certain players are starting to look at it. Toward Reklev, Isaiah Bradner, just to name a few. But we're going to go into some of the lists that I like for it, the original list, talk about some of the matchups, and some tech cards that I could see coming in and out of the deck. So with that being said, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into my mind. Alright, so here's the original list for the deck that we're going to be taking a look at today. As you can see, it focuses around TinaChomp as the... Well, actually, it's a little hard to tell, but TinaChomp is probably the main attacker, and then you got all these other Pokemon for different matchups, and it just creates this really cool, what in this list at least, fighting toolbox deck. And this list was originally created by Caleb Rogerson, or Infinite PTGG on Twitter. I'm going to go ahead and put his Twitter in the description, so shout out to Caleb for making this really cool deck. And I believe he played it in the Sunday Open tournament, which if you're not familiar with those, they're tournaments that run on Sunday every once in a while, or every week. And here it is. This deck is really crazy. Gonna go look at it, and then once we look at this, I'm gonna go ahead and give some text, talk about some matchups, and then go into 2 lists that I think going forward are probably stronger than the original list, and ways that you could play it going down the line. But the general idea is TinaChomp is crazy good. You got Calamitous Slash 160 for Psychic Fighting Colorless, which is a lot of energy, but we have some ways to manipulate that and get it attacking on turn 2. If your opponent's active already has any damage counters on it, it does 80 more damage. So you can do 240 with Calamitous Slash, very strong attack. Linear attack for just a colorless is going to do 40 anywhere, not bad. It can actually combo really well with Calamitous Slash. Then we got GG End for double Psychic and a fighting. You can just discard a Pokemon from play, and if you have some extra fighting energies on there, you can discard 2 Pokemon from play. So it's actually really cool. You can GG End away a single Pokemon, and if that's all they have in play, the game just ends. So something to look out for sure. Then we got, for our Eternatus matchup, we got our fighting boys. We got Marshadow Machamp-GX, mainly here for that 100 blows impact, or the Acme of Heroism. With a Karate Belt, you can lower these attack costs, and then with some Zigzagoons, you can use 100 blows impact to knock out Eternatus. And basically, those are your fighting counters to anything that's weak to fighting. So Pikarom and Eternatus mainly. And you also have Regirock V Rocky Tackle. Once again, you're going to use that Karate Belt, cheat out some energy with those manipulation cards, and then 190 going to one-shot a Eternatus after weakness. So you got these fighting guys for those matchups. You got Dedenne and Crobat for your draw. Zigzagoon is super important in this deck because it's going to set up a lot of numbers that you might need for different knockouts. For example, if you Calamitous Slash a Mewtwo for 240 and it has 1 damage counter on it, that's 250. Then you can use 2 more Zigzagoons to hit for 270, and math like that is where the Zigzagoons are going to matter a lot. And you got Coco Prism. This is going to be a way to cheat energy into play. Those lightning energies are going to be super good at using those colorless attack costs and kind of going around those. Then we got Vikavolt V. We already played lightning energy, and item lock is so strong that this is going to be super useful against those one prize decks, or any opportunity that you get to just use a paralyzing bolt, quickly item lock your opponent, maybe combine it with a stamp, get some damage on the board. Vikavolt, just a very solid card, and as you're going to see, it stays in all the lists in this video. Then this engine rocks Jirachi, so do the other 2 lists, and Jirachi is probably just the best way to have a draw engine with this deck. It's going to allow you to get that extra reach. You can use Switch and Scoop Up Net to get around stuff like that. Then we got Dini. This is just going to heal your active. You can heal 20 every turn from the active Pokemon. We got Latios-GX, Clear Vision-GX for a Psychic. Your opponent can't GX, and then a Tag Purge 120, and then prevent all tag teams from dealing damage to it. And now, interestingly enough, with Caleb's list, he decides to play Mewtwo and Mew, which I actually really like this way of playing it. But one of the other lists that we're going to take a look at is more focused in on the TinaChomp. But Mewtwo and Mew can kind of be a way to use various attackers in the deck, and then you can just discard those cards and attack with Mewtwo and Mew. Then we got a Birdkeeper engine for the Jirachis. We got a BD. This is an interesting card that I don't think a lot of people expect to see play anytime soon. You can attach a basic energy card from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. So this is just another way to accelerate energy into play. Since we have 3 different types of energy, we have 3 Viridian Forest, and then I'd say the last card that's pretty important in this deck is actually Karate Belt. If your opponent has more prize cards, or sorry, if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, your Pokemon cards attacks cost 1 fighting less. So this is going to be a really good way to get around some energy attack costs, and especially if you're behind. Then our energy line is pretty interesting for this list. We got Aurora Energy, we got 4 fightings, 3 lightnings, and 2 psychics. So this is Caleb's list. Now let's talk about the text and some matchups, and then we're going to go ahead and get into my list and another list. Alright, so for the matchup section, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the matchups that are going to be relevant, not every deck in the format, but the ones that are going to be super important, such as ADP, Eternatus, Inteleon VMAX, and any other slightly roguer concepts that might be important. Starting off with Eternatus, Eternatus should be probably one of your best matchups. You have two fighting attackers that are extremely efficient at taking knockouts against these 3-prize VMAXs, and basically, once your opponent takes a knockout, you can start using Karate Belt to fire up your attackers and get energy into play using BD or other means, and then you're going to be able to power up that Marshadow Machamp and that Regirock V and just take 2 knockouts on Eternatus VMAXs and win the game that way. You can use TinaChomp as a way to kind of go around any smaller attackers that they might throw at you, but mainly those fighting guys are going to be your way to victory in that matchup. Next up, we got Arceus Dialga-Palkia. Depending on the list you are using, this actually matters a lot. There's a few plays you can make. The first play is assuming they just GX and kind of get their strategy going. You want to avoid putting Dedenne, Crobat, or any 2-prize Pokemon into play to the best of your ability, so that they can't just gust around whatever you're attacking with and then knock out 2-prizers and win the game that way. So it's probably best to just go with double tag team, or a tag team a single prizer like Jirachi or Zigzagoon or Mewtwo, and just another tag team, or some combination of things so that they can't just gust twice and win the game. Assuming they GX, you can put some damage counters on them and hit with Calamitous Slash in order to KO the ADP with a bunch of Zigzagoon tags, but it's not super reliable, so you kind of just want to flip through your attackers, one-shot their Zacians while they're not one-shotting your tag teams, and go from there. It's kind of just a prize trade game. Most ADP matchups go like this. You just kind of want to make sure that they're unable to gust twice and win the game. And as long as you can KO their attackers before they can KO yours, you should be in an okay spot. TinaChomp is very good at one-shotting Pokemon like Zacian, so with some Zigzagoon tags, you can just scoop up net the Zigzagoon and then go from there. With Caleb's list in particular, he does play the Latios GX, so a different route that you could go is use your GX attack, Clear Vision, with a Mewtwo to get around the having to bench a ton of Pokemon, and if you can go second and get Clear Vision, you're going to be able to completely prevent ADP from using Alter Creation. So this is pretty interesting because now it takes away the main draw of ADP, which is getting that extra prizes on knockouts. So from here you can just trade better than them, and because they're never going to knock out your stuff and you're one-shotting their stuff, it could be pretty good. There's a lot of ways you could play this. Vikavolt V is pretty pivotal because if a Zacian attacks and they don't have another one on bench, it's pretty hard for them to actually attack again. So item locking, preventing that switch. There's a lot of ways you can play this, but think of this mainly as just a trade matchup, and then you want to rush them as fast as possible once they GX. Inteleon VMAX is going to be one of the closer matchups, because you can't actually one-shot the Inteleon VMAX with this deck, at least Caleb's list in particular, so you kind of just want to, it's going to be a very annoying matchup. They can remove some of your energies with Inteleon VMAX's first attack, and they can use the sniping attack to deal 60 to your Jirachis and stuff like that, so it's going to be super important to not bench any 1-prizers so that they can't just win in 3 turns, as Tord has said the deck usually works, and I would imagine this matchup's going to be closer. The Vikavolt V might be pretty pivotal here because you can item lock them while hitting for weakness, so you can set up numbers that way, and then you just want to use your TinaChomp and your attackers and go from there, trying to take knockouts before they can win the game. I would imagine this matchup is probably closer to 50-50, if not Inteleon favored, but there are ways to make this matchup better, as I'm going to cover later on in the video. The last archetype for matchups that I want to talk about is going to be those single prize stuff like Baby Bounds and Mad Party. Vikavolt V is going to be key here. If you can just shove a Vikavolt V down and go from there, you should be able to just item lock them and have them stumble. With Reset Stamp and a few other cards, you should be able to get a favorable prize trade going, because those decks like Baby Blounds and Mad Party are going to struggle against that item lock. If they do end up knocking out the Vikavolt V before you can nab any prizes with it, you're just going to have to race them. You're going to have to try and prevent them from taking knockouts on the tag teams by just knocking out their active, if it's a Baby Blound or maybe their bench support, and it just kind of plays the board state. You want to just be able to item lock them early and then win the trade in the end game, and that's just going to be how you're going to play the single prize matchups. But this deck has a lot of versatility, and because of the way this deck operates, there's going to be several different ways you could play this deck. So let's get into some of the techs and then get into some of the lists. Here are some of the tech cards that I think could actually be decent in the deck, and you're going to see this reflected in the list that I'm going to show you after we get through this section, but just want to go over them really quickly. We got Eldegoss V. This is going to be super useful for using BD over and over again, or just upping that ability to use Boss's Order. Maybe you can find a research if you're in a bad spot, so you can just turn a discarded research and make a quick ball into a draw out. You can find Boss's Order, and I don't actually think that Eldegoss is a bad card, so I think it's actually pretty strong in this deck, and you're going to see that in one of the lists that we take a look at that it actually is in there. The next two cards I want to talk about is more if you take a Mewtwo approach, which is going to be a different list that I show. We got Raichu, and Jolteon-GX. So the thought process behind this is if you take more of a Mewtwo approach, you can actually use these cards in combination with Coco Prism because of that lightning energy that we play. The Raichu is going to give you the access to Tandem Shock, which is a crazy good card or attack, 80 plus 80, and then you can paralyze the opponent's active. This is super strong. You can also set this up against Inteleon and either A, paralyze the Inteleon, or one-shot it by doing 320 plus some Zigzagoon tags and just knock it out. So this is actually not a bad card, and I think it helps the Inteleon matchup, especially if you go with that Mewtwo route. The other option is Jolteon-GX. This is going to be super useful against, like I said, Inteleon and Scorch and other big Pokemon that you can't actually KO in one shot. And the thought process here is you can go Stamp, Tandem Shock, hit them for 160, and then they get paralyzed, and you can Swift Run GX with some Zigzagoon tags, finish up any damage. Or if you Swift Run first, they can't hit back into you, you can Calamitous Slash afterwards. And Swift Run just says prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. So not a whole lot of ways to get around this right now. When combined with Stamp or Paralysis, you can actually just get a few free hits. I think Swift Run's actually pretty good. Electro Bullet is also on the card, 30 and 30 to 1 to the opponent's bench. It's not bad, but I don't think you're going to be using it very much. Then we got a second copy of Vikavolt V. This would be for if you're paranoid of any one prize attackers. You can get 2 Vikavolts, and you saw this in the PogChamp deck that Isaiah and I ran for the Pog tournament. You can actually just win a lot of single prize matchups by just going lone Vikavolt. So if you can play 2 Vikavolt, if you're worried about some of those matchups, you can test it out for yourself, see how it goes. But this is definitely a card that I see in making those matchups better. We got Oricorio-GX. This was the addition made by Isaiah Bradner on his Twitter that kind of all of these lists I've been seeing have adapted. This card's super strong. If one of your Pokemon get knocked out, just go ahead and draw 3 cards. So super strong addition is going to just let you see more cards, and it's in both the lists that I'm about to feature. Then this list both these lists only play Boss's Order, so a Great Catcher is a complete option. This is just so that you can draw cards while finding a Gust option in the deck. Eldegoss can also take this place, so I think that this might not be an awful card to include, but it's not in either of the lists that we're going to take a look at. Second BD, also an option. This just depends on how much you value that energy acceleration in the mid game. If your attacker goes down, you might need a second BD, or if you prize it. I personally don't really like BD in the deck, but it's there, it's an option. Then we got another Aurora Energy just to up the count of Aurora Energy. This deck relies on Viridian, so I don't think it's too big of a deal, but depending on how you want to take this deck, you could play Aurora Energy just to get some options without Viridian. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the 2 deck lists that I think going forward are probably the best way to play this deck. This is Isaiah Bradner's list for the deck. It takes a very heavy TinaChomp focus. There's no Mewtwo or any of those tech attackers from Caleb's list in here. This is mainly just going to be prioritizing TinaChomp and some of the fighting guys. And if you look at it, it's pretty streamlined. There's actually not a whole lot going on here besides that fighting toolbox part plus the TinaChomp and the Vikavolt. So those are your main attackers. The TinaChomp is going to be super powerful for taking those one-shots. And overall, it's pretty streamlined. We got the 2 copies of BD and the Oricorio. It's definitely some of the things that Isaiah added to this deck. And this is mainly just a TinaChomp deck that uses Zigzagoon to take one-shots. I think this list is actually really strong. I really like it, and this inspired me for the list that I'm about to show you, which I think needs a little more explanation on my Mewtwo TinaChomp deck box. So this is my list for the deck. I wanted to take some of the elements from Caleb's and some of the elements from Isaiah's. I tested this out a little bit on stream before I had even seen Isaiah post his list. I did take the Oricorio from his list and add it in here because I thought that was super strong. But on my stream on Monday, I was playing around with this deck, just getting some ideas down. I added the Raichu and the Jolteon because I thought this could be pretty cool. But I actually took out the fighting guys. I wasn't thinking about Eternatus, but after playing this deck on Monday, I was actually pretty impressed with it. I liked the Mewtwo element, and yeah, one card that I forgot to mention, if you want to take the Mewtwo approach, Jirachi-GX could be important for that Mewtwo matchup. But some of the ideas that I kind of explained in the text part, we got the Mewtwo package this time, and much more heavier focus on that with Raichu and Raichu-GX and Jolteon-GX going to allow you to use those lightning energies more effectively. Paralyzation is really good when you can stamp someone, just prevent them from attacking if they miss a switch. It's super strong. Swift Run is another option for those VMAX decks, Scorch and Inteleon mainly, but there are other matchups and situations where Swift Run could be applicable. I would love to increase the count of TinaChomp to 2. If you prize the TinaChomp, you might be in a little bit of a rough situation, so I definitely want to up this to 2 if I can find the space. I plan on playing this deck more on my stream tonight, twitch.tv/JenksTCG, if you want to come hang out on Wednesday. But yeah, we got basically the same idea, just a Mewtwo focus. I play no copies of BD. I haven't really liked that card so far, but I could see its way into the list. 2 copies of Aurora Energy. Karate Belt is very powerful for using those fighting attackers and the fighting attack costs. And then we got the Scoop Up Net engine for the the Jirachi. Another card I could see in here is the Eldegoss or the Minor Port Mewtwo, just to be able to get supporters back. But right now I'm just working with a support line of 2 Dedenne and 1 Crobat V. I could also see the Crobat become Eldegoss or another Dedenne, and that's really this list. I think that this deck has a ton of potential. I would love to play in some tournaments. I just don't really have the time with my work schedule, but this is the way I'd play the deck for now. I'm going to test it some more tonight on stream. And yeah, this has been Inside the Mind with JenksTCG. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know if you have any criticisms, any feedback on the video, and I would love to hear how your testing goes with this deck. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you guys.